To Lebanon. This is a live shot of Beirut right now. The city has been declared a disaster zone after that enormous explosion. Let's take this shot full frame. It is extraordinary, that view live looking down to the port, those silos, what's left of them. Smoke still rising from the port. Major downtown streets are littered with debris. Hospitals, they are overwhelmed, overflowing and struggling to cope with thousands of injured, many still without electricity. The latest numbers we're getting right now, 300,000 people in that city will be displaced. They're homeless. 4,000 plus are injured. The death toll officially is around 100. That is going to keep on rising. And down at the centre there, near those silos where that blast went off, we're being told, obviously, fire crews there were lost, many of them. So the search is on to try and determine how many of those were killed in the initial blast. Obviously, the death toll continues to rise. Samar Hadid is an Australian living in Beirut and joins me now. Samar, thank you so much for joining me tonight. Just how close to the explosion were you?
Well, my apartment is within a kilometre of the port where the explosion hit. So my apartment is completely destroyed. I'm really lucky to be alive because the damage was so extensive that it ripped through the entire building and the apartment. So I'm really lucky to escape.
We're seeing that. Injury. We're certainly seeing that now. I mean, all of the windows are blown in, all of the glass going everywhere as well, Samar.
It was a really terrifying experience. When the explosion hit, I thought it was a bomb or an earthquake. The building was shaking, so I hit the floor and tried to find a corner in my apartment that is safe. The ceilings came down, furniture just ripped apart, so it was really terrifying. I also managed to escape the building through the staircase, but there was blood all over the staircase from people who were really severely injured. When I evacuated the building, there were people just injured all over the street, and unfortunately the hospitals were so overwhelmed and overcrowded that they could not accept any more people. No. And this is happening in the middle of a pandemic where the health system here is already overstretched dealing with coronavirus. And to put it in perspective, Lebanon was already facing an economic crisis. People were already living in poverty. We're already facing starvation. In my street alone, buildings have been destroyed, neighborhoods have been ruined, brought to rubble. There's just glass and destruction all over. So it's obvious that Lebanon cannot cope with this crisis. It desperately needs support, needs international aid support if people are going to be able to rebuild their lives.
What do you do in your apartment right now that is ruined?
Well, I have to evacuate my apartment because it really is unsafe to remain here. The whole place is completely destroyed and damaged. So the best thing for me to do is to evacuate this area. It's also within the zone of the port that was hit. And I'm hearing reports of the fumes in the atmosphere being quite toxic as well. Right. So I think it's best that I do leave really soon.
Well, we hope you do, and it's extraordinary that you did survive. And Samar, we really appreciate you just sharing your experience, and obviously a lot of Australians thinking of you and everyone who's there. So thank you for joining us, Samar Hadid.
Thank you.
Now, it hit in a flash and it was devastating, but let's take a look at the blast in slow motion. You can see the explosion taking place before it is engulfed by that mushroom cloud and then the shockwave emanating out. Now, experts estimate that that's approximately 3 kilotons of TNT. That's the equivalent of a sixth of the little boy atomic bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima. Belle True was thrown off her feet by the blast. Belle, thank you so much for joining me this evening. Let me ask you first, what happened when that explosion hit?
Well, it hit about 6 p.m. Beirut time, and I was actually not in the centre of Beirut, but a few kilometres outside of town. But the blast was so huge, the shockwaves were so huge, I was actually thrown from my feet anyway. When we came back down into town, it was chaos. There was just, absolute ambulances everywhere. There was shattered windows. There were torn fronts of buildings. There were balcony bits coming off. It was absolutely staggering level of destruction. On top of that, we had the injured who were kind of walking around stunned, some of them on the back of motorcycles being taken to various different hospitals. Some of those hospitals, as you can see from the footage, were actually hit by the shockwave themselves. So we're trying to operate emergency departments outside in the car parking lots in desperate attempt to treat the flood of wounded, whilst they were actually pulling their own colleagues and their patients who were trapped inside the hospitals out. So it was really staggering. I haven't really ever experienced anything quite like that in terms of a magnitude of a shockwave blast or an explosion in all my years of covering conflict, war and bombing.
Quite extraordinary. And this is your vision. Tell it, this is your apartment as well. What's the damage inside there?
Well, my apartment is about a kilometre away from the epicenter of the blast. When I came back, I was expecting there to be some broken glass, of course, but not this level of destruction.
It's a new day there, Belle. What is happening outside?
Well, when I went down this morning, the first thing I saw, of course, was people trying to deal with the damage to their buildings, their shop fronts, their homes. Everyone's in some kind of mass cleaning effort. Those who aren't trying to clean up the mess on the streets are looking for their loved ones. There's still many missing people. In fact, an Instagram account's been set up with at least 90 posts. It's already got 62,000 followers of people who are missing, cross-referencing them against the names of people who are in different intensive care wards in different hospitals, and also, very sadly, in the morgue. As you can see from the damage there at the moment to Beirut port, it's staggering. So they're still pulling bodies from underneath the rubble there, as well as residential areas across the city.
Belle, with your journalist hat back on, are there serious questions being asked there about why that was being stored in that amount of quantity on that port, and where did it come from? Because it's been stored there 6 years, we're being told. Where did it come from before that?
Well, the Lebanese president said that it was over 2,700 tons of ammonium nitrate, which can be used for bomb making, but also fertilizers, and had not been properly stored, which is really staggering given that this is Beirut port. It's the main hub for imports, exports, and it's also very close to residential areas like the area where I live, but also many bars and restaurants are in the neighbourhoods surrounding it. So it's an incredibly dangerous place to put these highly explosive substances, especially if they're not being properly stored. We're still not sure 100% where this came from. We're told that it may have been confiscated cargo from a ship, as you said, 6 years ago. But there are still so many questions here, and many people are very angry because, of course, the damage is huge. Lebanon was having a tricky time anyway before this happened, and now this has just devastated people's lives in a way that, we can't really understand.
It's hard to understand. I think it'll take a long time for people to get their head around this. Belle True, thank you for joining us.